welcome Tammara Prager to our podcast. I'm excited to have you on here.
Thanks.
You and I have been working real estate in Flagstaff for a long time. How long have you been doing real estate in Flagstaff?
17 years.
17 years. So you've been doing it just a few years longer than I have. And you're still in the Flagstaff market, but you also recently moved to Sedona as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's a whole lot of fun as well.
Yeah, I like that market.
Completely different town.
Yes.
What is the one thing, we'll talk about a lot of things today.
Okay.
It's just a fun conversation. What's maybe the one thing that you found about Sedona that living next to it, you think you know Sedona, but what's the one thing you found living in Sedona that you're like, oh, this is a little different?
Yeah, I would say that the people, I think that the people that I thought were the locals were not the locals. And now that I've met the locals, they're different than I thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. How so?
Much more down to earth than I thought. I thought that, there's this belief that everybody who lives in Sedona is into all the vortexes and the woo-woo and all the, psychics and that. And I don't find the locals to be like that at all. I find them to just be everyday people, just like here in Flagstaff. So that was very exciting for me.
Sure. Yeah. And that, I'm sure you get some of that as well in the community, but that there's a lot more diversity than just
yes,
tourist town once you're there.
Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. And you, well, see, and so you still, and you have done rentals, you've managed, you've done long-term, you do short-term. We've talked a lot recently on the podcast about long-term, short-term. My brother is a property manager and was on, he's up in the Salt Lake area, but I thought it was really fun to have him on. We just posted that last week, and to where having perspective on the long-term, short-term, and we talked briefly about that. Do you have any hot mic takes on long-term versus short-term outside of the ethics of it, right? Because
right.
I guess I should be careful on saying ethics of it, because some people think, hey, in certain areas and the need for housing over a business, there's a lot of personal thoughts on it, but just from a property investor standpoint.
Right. So I have one of each. I have a long-term rental that I have 4 college guys in. It's in University Heights right near campus, so it makes sense. They can all ride their bikes there.
Okay.
And they love it.
Let me move this mic a little closer. Sorry, let me move that a little closer for you there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So they've been there. This is their 4th lease that they've signed with me,
okay.
And they have their own set of pros and cons. And then I also have we just turned our personal house into a short-term rental, and it's nothing like I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Kind of like having kids, right? Like you have all these ideas in your head of what it's going to be like, and it was nothing like I thought it was going to be, and all the pros I thought turned out to be more cons, and all the cons I thought turned out to be pros. So,
oh no,
I think I like long term a little better. It's
okay.
not as labor intensive.
Yeah,
and I did not take into account what it costs in utilities.
Oh,
the utilities are very high. I didn't consider that. Like I considered the coffee and the sheets and the furniture and the advertising and the time back and forth and mowing the lawn and snow removal. I thought of all those things, but I forgot about the utilities, which are about $1,000 a month.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. So
what's
that's a big difference. It's just shy of 2,000.
And it's $1,000.
Well, with internet and somebody to pull the trash cans in and out.
And is that do you have, if I may ask, is that like a hot tub or something? Because that so no.
AC, we do have AC.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because do
you do any controls on that where you because those who have been into Airbnbs typically see there was one I went into and it was pretty ghetto where it's you gotta call management if you want to go past this like temperature range, right?
We
Like they
do
had
have
like
a
it
low
set.
setting and a high setting.
Yeah. Okay.
And only because our air conditioner, if you run it below 70, it will freeze and then stop working.
Yeah. Oh, that's
And
like,
so once we explain that,
yeah.
like, it's not just because we don't want you to run it low. It's because if you run it too low, it will freeze because it's a condensating AC. So it will actually freeze and then it'll turn off on you. And we don't want that to happen to you. So if you find yourself uncomfortable, can you please call us?
Yeah.
That's how we
Gotcha. So what, as far as any other, what's maybe one of the upsides though that you didn't anticipate? Is there anything that was like a pleasant surprise or was it all negative surprises?
Well, we are getting really good bookings and really good reviews.
Yeah.
And it's very heartwarming to get like we, had our whole family here. We got to celebrate this and that, like hearing the stories of them actually using our house kind of the way we did, because we kind of missed that since we raised our daughter there,
Yeah.
So that's really nice to get, the 5-star reviews is like, woo.
Yeah. And I think at least this is my 2 cents, is like I think that we will have an equalization or a balance of like everyone and their dog was getting into this.
It's already happening. Yeah.
And understanding that this is not everyone's cup of tea. This is a business. And much like, I watched this little YouTube clip and it was kind of arrogant of like, I don't know, it was one of the major hotel owners or CEOs or something saying, oh, we're not worried about Airbnb. We're completely different. Like we are an experience and, we have the on-site massage and the restaurants and all these different things. Like we're an experience. And that's where my belief is that, a lot of people that were just like, hey, I can own a house, have some cheap, furniture off of Craigslist in here and have people just booking. Like that will, I know there's going to be some anomalies where that still happens, especially if it's a good location and Flagstaff's an attractive location. But in large part, it's like the people that actually care about people having a good experience. And, hopefully we don't get too much hate in the comments, mostly real estate focused people listen to this, but it's something where I think that like I can't take my family to most hotels, right?
Too many kids.
And it's well, and in the sense of like, we're going to book multiple rooms. We don't have a kitchen. They're going to have pizza on their pillow. Like, it's just like an Airbnb model works just way, way better for it. But I still want an experience. Like I still love like little extras when you have just a nice setup house and things. So I don't know. I think we'll have some equalization. I think free markets, that's where I love can hopefully create that competition where people that are going to stay in the game will up their game. So hopefully there's better Airbnbs and the ones that are crappy just turn into real estate for sale.
I got some comments from my neighbors that I was really surprised about. So the house that I'm talking about that I have an Airbnb in now, we have lived in it and we have also long-term rented it and now we're short-term renting it. And every one of my neighbors are like, we like the short-term the best.
Really?
And I'm like,
versus you living there? That's hilarious.
I'm like, I know my dog's obnoxious, but he's not that bad.
That's some honest feedback as well.
But I was surprised. But we keep like the lawn looks better. Everything is, like more tidy and we're not making noise all week long there. It's mostly people there on the weekends. So we were really surprised to get that feedback.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That is super interesting.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I think you think of, and maybe it's a matter of like in the highs and lows of it, knowing that if you have, if you have some obnoxious college, I can talk about college kids because I'm not a class.
Sure.
You have some obnoxious college kids move in as a long-term rental. They're there for like 3 to 4 years while they're, graduating college. And it's like party all the time. Like that could really be obnoxious and a nuisance. Versus,
or they don't mow the lawn, or they park their cars everywhere. That's more like the complaints we hear. Yeah.
Yep. Or if it's like, hey, or on the short-term side of things of like an obnoxious guest is there, they're not all going to be obnoxious. And that's a much more limited time frame. Right. So it's like, okay, again, the alternative of having like a great neighbor and they're there for years is fantastic. So it's like, hey, maybe you don't have the same highs, but you don't have the same lows as far as the short-term goes. Right. That's interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that. I heard it from more than one neighbor.
I do think we should public announce, though, and say, like, if you own a short-term rental and you are tired of it and you want to use your money elsewhere, sell it.
Yeah.
Call Tammara Prager and list
For sure.
your rental property. And especially depending if you converted, like, people need to know this on the tax conversion standpoint. If you were a primary residence, just like you did, and you left it, and you are coming up on your capital gains hit on that, unless you are determined to hold it forever, you should sell.
Yes.
Right? And I don't want to sound sleazy when I say that, but no, it's strategic. Like, don't miss this opportunity and assessment. You got to be on top of your taxation here.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's, as you're talking about, a lot of people might be getting out of that game, or it's not as lucrative and things are getting more difficult and they may want to put their money elsewhere. I think a lot of people need to understand that and get out if they want to get out. And it could be a noble thing too, because people need homes right now.
Yes. And so we have bought all of our homes on a primary loan and have lived in it for at least a year before we turn it into a rental, so that we save money on the
strategy.
loan.
Yep.
And then when we go to sell it, we would just move back into it for 2 years and then sell it. And we, as you know, we move around a lot. Yeah. So that's been our strategy rather than doing the 1031. But there is a property we might sell in Flagstaff in 1031 to buy something in Sedona. We'll see. Yeah.
And that's...
It's hard to sell, but I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, and that's where because I'm a buy, refi, die. Did you hear that, tax? Yeah. That's the mentality, like, never sell mentality. Well, and I think the small asterisk to that is if you're just rebalancing that on saying, hey, I need to maximize this and I'm moving it from real estate to real estate. Like, that's why 1031 exists to help you do that.
And you could always use a Delaware Delaware statutory trust too. If you don't want to buy another property, you can 1031 into, it's like a real estate trust that just pays you dividends instead of having to own more property. You can 1031 into that.
Oh, really? I didn't know about that.
If you're done, you don't want a landlord anymore, you're sick of it, you want to get out of the game, you can still
because it's like investment.
Yes, you can still do
Tammara
one
and I are
last.
not CPAs.
You can do one last 1031 and just get your dividends each month.
Okay, interesting. Very cool. So it's called Delaware
Statutory Trust. DST.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Learn something new every day. There you go. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, so that's, a lot of people should be thinking about that. And as far as, and I'm going to ask, it's been very difficult to engage with just a busy schedule and things on all the things that Flagstaff was doing on the short-term rental conversations. Did you happen to attend any of those meetings or hear what?
I did. So I read over the Coconino County plan.
Okay.
And I really liked it, actually. And I did not actually go to the city one, but I sent in comments and I said, I really like what the county has done, and you should try to mirror that or just adopt that.
Yeah.
Or just have it countywide, because basically the only thing that an owner wouldn't like, a short-term rental owner wouldn't like, is that you have to notify all of your surrounding neighbors. Yeah. And let them know who you are. Here's my phone number. Here's how you contact me if there's problems. But if you're not doing that, really you are the problem. Well, so
you have to understand. Hey,
I mean, there are some neighbors who may be, vindictive, but
if you're doing it, they know already.
Right.
And then from just a communication and even like a safety standpoint on both sides of things, like, it makes sense, right? Yeah. I know that's what Sedona does as well. Like, they've passed that permitting process. And to me, it just makes sense where, to where, hey, if something's happening in your property and they don't know who to call and your house is burning down or you got an emergency or something, or, it just makes sense that there's this type of communication. And it's not, I know in times past, I've seen different bills where it's like, hey, there's ability, like, this isn't a comment period, right? At least as it's written up. It's not like they can say like, well, we really don't like that or something, right? And, and you got to be above board anyways, right?
You should be.
As far as me saying, like, if If a neighbor's going to complain on you, whether you own the house, rent the house, short-term rental the house, if
Or
you're
even
doing
live there.
something that's against county code or permits or something, it doesn't matter. Like you can, if a neighbor is going to be, and I know, someone might say, oh, like I'm just going to be on the DL and like, that it doesn't matter whether you're any of those categories. So you might as well just be on the up and up, communicate with people. And this is the best thing in my opinion for neighborhood. It should exist.
I want to know what's going on. I have cameras everywhere, but
Yeah. On your home or on the short term as well? Or just on all properties? Yeah. No.
I don't have any on my long-term
okay.
rental, but
yeah. Do people?
I drive
just
by
exterior,
it all the time.
just exterior cameras?
Yeah, just exterior.
Okay. And
no interior.
And do people have problems with that at all? Or do you ever get complaints about it? Or no. No. Yeah. It's good to keep tabs.
Not so far.
Yeah. So no, well, that's awesome. And now on the real estate side of things, what are you seeing in the real estate side of things right now? You've been through a lot of different markets in 17 years.
I have. And I'm a little more hopeful about this year's market. So we still have the inventory issue, which is not fun when you're representing a buyer. It's great when you're representing a seller, though.
Yeah.
But I still see the competition out there, but it doesn't seem as crazy. Like in 2020 and 2021, I found myself worrying about a lot of buyers because they were having to fight so hard. And I myself overpaid and I played the game of, we'll pay this much over. And, I don't like representing a buyer in that frantic, like that's never a place you want to be with a frantic buyer. You're trying to help them, So I don't see as much frantic this year, and that makes me very happy.
So far, yeah. As far as with these high rate environment, low inventory, it's been relatively paced. I think buyers have, I wouldn't call it a buyer's market, but have had a lot more calm and ability and negotiations in the last 6 to 8 months, which has been super, super good. I'm worried that we're already seeing that move away. I know like this last weekend, just anecdotally, I knew of the 2 listings that hit Ponderosa Trails, both above 800,000. Yep. And that went within days. And I understand multiple offers and cash and escalation clauses.
Yep.
Which we haven't heard the word escalation clause for like 14 months now.
Right. Ish.
So that's a little concerning. Do you think, and I know we're just speculating here, and the only reason that that's happened on those 2 listings is there were 2 listings in Ponderosa Trails. Right.
I think the weather has us on a little bit of a delay. Like we normally are already starting our season right around spring break.
Yeah.
In March.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's going to be more like the middle of April this year. So I'm hoping maybe we can get some more inventory happening, mid-April, and then we won't hear that phrase as much.
Yeah. And I think it could be safe to say, and this is what I think it's hard for a lot of folks to wrap their head around a little bit, is that you're going to, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is you're going to see some very targeted things happening, but for a specific reason. And I guess what I'm trying to say there is not all market is going to move the same. Correct. I know that there are some listings right now. I know of a particular listing. Hey, if you're in the market for a 2-bedroom, go get it. I have a great client listing, a 2-bedroom in Presidio, and she's been listed for a while, and it's a 2-bedroom, right? And it's just not in my mind, the demographic of buyer that would buy that listing is not buying right now in the wintertime. Right. I think she'll do fine in the months to come. Right. But that product is a little bit more niche.
It is.
And so that's where, so we are seeing, like people are seeing, there are some listings you're clicking on there that are saying, hey, they've been listed for 45 or 60 days. But then there are others that have been listed for 2 days and they're gone.
Yes.
And would you just account that to just the desirability of product?
Yes.
And So I think that's,
However,
go. So I'm curious. Yes.
I always tell my buyers, they're like, well, gosh, this one's been on the market forever. We could go in low. We could go in really low. I'm like, well, we can, but I'm going to tell you about the law of attraction, because I know many agents who have had a listing sit and no offers. And soon as one person likes it, don't you know, everybody likes it. And so you have to just be a little bit careful of that in this kind of market. So,
and I see that play out on our side of things.
Do you?
Yes. Where they looked at it and then they're going to look at it again. And they kind of think like, hey, I hold all the cards. Right. But that's why I'm really, we've talked about it quite a bit, that buyers need to be very, very careful on that end of like, yes, do your best to work with your realtor and get the best deal you can.
Yes.
Yeah. But work with the key piece is the realtor piece of then understanding what that can be.
Right.
And sometimes, and knowing that I think timing is everything, just like you're saying, to where I've had clients that are like, hey, we really hold all the cards. And then they were kind of thinking about it. And then they were, put in a low ball, and it came back, and they were kind of going back and forth. And all of a sudden there's one or two other things in the hopper. And it's like, well, if you would have signed, like I saw one that I think it was upwards of like a $50,000 plus decision point, where if they would have signed that counter, they would have been good. But because then other competition came, and that's just the nature of markets, that they ended up having to go $50,000 higher than that counter and got it. And yes, they get the home, but it's just a matter of like, just be careful.
Yeah.
Be careful. And is it helpful? And I know you probably, correct me if I'm wrong, Tammara, because you go through that process much, 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 much more than I do as far as that initial buyer negotiation piece. We just send that pre-qual letter out. But is it something where you kind of coach a lot of buyers through that we want to feel good with an initial offer, but it's just that. It's your initial offer, right? If we're progressing through the home inspection and everything, and you find additional things out and you want to come to the table, renegotiate, and consider even canceling, you can.
Of course.
And you probably don't, would you say you don't coach your clients necessarily on like saying, hey, if they don't give you $10K, we're going to back out. And you don't want those buyers really setting an unrealistic bar and wasting everyone's time.
Right.
But just feel good about it, and then we'll massage it. I don't know.
Right. I like to go through all the emotions of, what happens if they say yes? What happens if they only say yes on a few things? And what happens if they say absolutely no?
Yeah.
Let's try to think ahead about all the possible scenarios, rather than just, trying to cram it down their throat and saying, do these repairs or we walk.
Yeah. I think that's very, very important for the psychology.
Right. Well, because you don't know how you're going to feel until you get the answer. But if you go ahead and try to think of all of the answers that you might get, then you can you can have that leg up of knowing what you're going to do.
Yeah. And I know there's so much that plays into it, but one of the principles that I think a lot of people don't think about enough is the opportunity cost. Right. And that's where when it comes to these negotiations, not that I want to tell people like, just once you've signed a contract, you got to push yourself into it and just get it done no matter what. But you also have to understand like, okay, if you're going to just get your ego built up on $2,000 worth of some relatively non-health and safety, but repair or something like that, is it really worth going back to the starting line or just dealing with that?
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. Well, I just had a recent cancellation. I had a buyer. He was buying a townhome, which he was like, okay, I'll get a townhome because they take care of the roof and the outside, and they do so much of the work. I can spend my time just, doing what I want. I don't have to do all these exterior repairs. Yep. This will be great. He kind of was settling for a townhome and talked himself into it. We got into escrow. The inspection came back, and the deck was completely falling off the back of the house.
Oh, wow.
Like it was this far, like it had detached on one corner, and it was this far off of the actual structure.
Okay.
And there was a bunch of rotten wood underneath, and the poles that were into the cement had, damage, and there was all kinds of faulty grade around the house, all these exterior things. And I said, hang on, let's call the HOA and let's see what they cover. So we sent them all of the repairs and we said, could you tell us which items you cover and which items you don't so we can make this decision? And they're like, we don't cover any of those.
Yeah.
And he was like, why would I spend $2,500 a month for this or a year for this?
Say,
sorry.
Where's this HOA?
So $2,500 a year
Yeah.
for this HOA to take care of the exterior when they're not really taking care of it anyways, and they don't cover anything. He's like, I'm out. And I was like, I have to agree. Like, why would you might as well just get your own house without the HOA and spend that money on the actual house,
Yes, no. And that's a huge point that you bring up that not a lot of people know about when it comes to then condos and HOA or condos and townhomes, because of the attached aspect of the housing, that a lot of time that there's typically a master policy in place and then also some potential maintenance agreements within the HOA community and the CCNRs, but those vary widely.
Yeah,
right?
and they all differ.
We'll see some
different.
townhomes like that where it's basically like, no, we have a master insurance policy that basically covers like common area liability insurance kind of stuff where it doesn't actually cover dwelling and things. Oh. Or you'll have
this one.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Additionally, there was an $8,500 assessment to pay for the roof.
Yeah.
So now you're spending $2,500 a year for them to maintain the outside, which includes the roof, but they don't have enough money. So now they're going to charge a one-time assessment of $8,500 to put new roofs on the whole building.
Yeah. And that is, again, just educating people where, just know what you're paying for. Right. And it's and a lot of HOAs tend to, it's an interesting balance where, so the townhomes in Ponderosa Trails just passed a special assessment for their roofs, which is like $10,000 from owner now. Oh, right. Per owner. Yeah. and that's the cost of a roof.
Yeah.
These are about 20-ish year old townhomes. So, and it's Flagstaff roof. I don't know a roof that stays for 30 years in Flagstaff. It's just not our MO.
If it's like your
typical like asphalt roofing, right? Mm-hmm. And so in working through or in talking with folks in that community, and I have a property in that HOA, and it's just a matter of what happens is they pass these initial, so 20 plus years ago, the developer sets this all up and then hands the HOA over, right? You know all this, but just for the general listener. And then they, in my experience, is then most people say, hey, why am I paying this HOA? And they get on the board or work with the board, and they really don't work to actually assess what that HOA should cover or needs to cover. And everyone just has this mindset of like, let me pay as little as possible. They sell or whatever. And most, I'm sure there's a pretty high turnover. Not many original owners still own in there and had that mindset. And so then all of a sudden you fast forward 20 years later, 20 years worth of inflation, 20 years worth of property deterioration, of maintenance and issues and things. And so all of a sudden it's like, no, there is not, money to pay for new roofs for the entire community 20 years later. That just doesn't exist. And so it's kind of interesting where there's a lot of pros to HOAs, but there can be a lot of downsides as well. And on top of that, everyone wants to live their lives. So you pay a management company. And what's the typical take on management of an HOA? It's like, seems like it's a quarter to like a third of the budget sometimes.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It's not cheap. And I'm not going to throw them under the bus. Sometimes they do things, sometimes they don't.
There are some good ones out there.
There are some good ones out there, and there's some ones that are just taking your money from a HOA community, but you are part of the community, and you can always shop out who you use. But most people, like, what is it? When I was like in college or high school, I was like, if you wanted to just, this is left fielder here for you, Tammara. I was like, insurance, like companies that take things related to insurance or government money, seem to do extremely, extremely well just because people don't pay attention. I'd probably put HOAs in the same category of, right? We all pay an insurance, you all pay your taxes. It's just what you do. And you just don't pay attention to it all the time. And so anyways, so I'd put HOAs in that same category of like, hey, tune in. You should know what your HOA is doing. You should know what is covered from a buyer standpoint. Oh. And do you do any other due diligences when you're working with HOAs other than just your standard, hey, here's the CC&Rs, here's any questions you have for the HOA specifically? Do you do anything additional just to help them get the feel for it?
I do. I used to, I go over that HOA addendum with them really well because it used to be that I felt like if they had a capital improvement fee, I was like, ooh. But now I'm like, actually, capital improvement fee could save you because this particular HOA that I was just talking about, they just started a capital improvement of $1,000 for each transfer. So eventually they will have coffers and they won't have to assess the community to do a roof.
Yeah.
But anybody buying right now is getting the double whammy of both. But had they have had a capital contribution fee, maybe 10 years ago, they would have probably had enough money to pay for the roof.
Sure.
And so they are working on the problem, but right now it's kind of at a crossroads. So I used to not like a capital improvement fee, but now I'm kind of seeing the benefit if they can prove where they're going to spend and how they're going to spend that capital improvement fee. I'm actually for that. So I like to talk to people about the differences of what each fee does. Where does your transfer fee actually go if you're paying a transfer fee, and where does the disclosure fee go, and where does the capital improvement fee go? Like, what are they actually doing with that? And then you can tell if you're in a good HOA or not.
Yeah, and I think just the knowledge is power on that in a large part there where, getting a feel, because it's not too different from if you just, are outside of an HOA or a big HOA that's supposed to help with different things in the house or things where you're going to have to budget for your own roof. You're going to have to budget for your own repairs, right? So it's not too different from that, other than you have this community tied to these things that you need to get moving the same direction, which can be very difficult, right? And working through all that. And so, it's just a different dynamic. It's a very different dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, HOAs are good and bad, right? Like, I do think that it kind of keeps the community looking better, which kind of helps values stay up in your neighborhood if you have one. But there are people who won't buy in an HOA. So,
and just know
it's good and bad.
Yeah. And just know what you're getting yourself into. I think is the biggest thing. Like if you know that you can't, and that's where, I've sat on HOA boards and have been part of that. And it's just like the I wouldn't call it sad or most kind of annoying thing, I think, is ignorance. When like you'll get some complaint to the board or something of like, what do you mean I couldn't short-term rental my property, my realtor or whatever? You're like, that's like never going to work in a court of law to say my realtor said so. Right. And so it's like, no, don't be ignorant, do your education. And if something comes down the road, we're like, hey, they did a special assessment down the road, or did you know I get billed outside? So some HOAs do this too, where it's like, your monthly dues are helping towards maintenance and insurance, but you still have like an annual assessment that you also have to pay in a little extra insurance annually. I know some of HOAs that do that, and it's like, if you knew about it, it's not a problem, right? If you didn't know about it, then you get caught off guard, and no one likes surprises anyways, right? It's like the same time when we have a client call us like, I thought I was in a 30-year fixed mortgage. You're like, well, your taxes went up, and taxes are part of your payment, and like,
and insurance.
Again, and so we said it 10 times, right? And so like, where else are you paying taxes? But it's just kind of that thing is, if you know it and understand it, like, I think that's very, very important for people to know and understand when it comes to HOAs. So that's a very important rabbit hole to go into. Do you see, one question I maybe have for you on that, just total anecdotally and personal, just off the cuff here. It's interesting to me where, like you said, is some, like I knew for a while, and let's talk specific, like Ponderosa Trails kind of seem to have like more of a stronger value over like University Heights, generally speaking, like square foot for square foot, just in the sense, probably it's like a little newer, probably the neighborhood's little, like, you know, with the HOA factor, maybe some little, like a little more cookie cutter-ish. I don't know if they seem to have a value, right? So I don't know, just neighborhoods seem nicer, a little newer. They seem to have a little more value, square foot, dollar for dollar. But at the same time, people like being outside of HOAs, and especially as short-term rental has gotten more popular, even if some Ponderosa, because I think there's pockets of Ponderosa hotels where you can short-term,
Right.
that people just don't like being part of that at all, just from a total risk standpoint if they are going to do short-term. So I've noticed, especially like in just, again, anecdotally viewing in the Sedona market, where I think that's very aggressive, where if it's in an HOA, it is
Very
like,
split down there.
yeah, and it can be like, I was kind of just seeing like it can be almost like hundreds of thousands of dollars difference in value.
It is different. Yeah.
Assigned to if it's outside of an HOA, given that it's a perception of I have more full use of the property rights. Right. I'm not restricted, and people are paying a premium for a less restriction. Do we see that in Flagstaff happening, of like areas like University Heights where there's no HOAs, that there are more of a premium happening, or is it still, yeah?
It's not as drastic as Sedona is,
Okay.
but you can make significantly more in Sedona than you can in Flagstaff on a short-term rental.
Gotcha.
Just because the season is longer, weather-wise, so you have more bookings.
Yeah.
But I would say, you know, when short-term rentals first came out, people were, you know, like choosing areas where they could short-term rental only.
Yep.
You know, but some of the HOAs you can short-term rental in. So then, you know, it became a little difficult trying to determine which and where, and then you'd have to go comb through the CCNRs and make sure, and then find, and then you'd have to call and make sure they weren't getting ready to vote on something that would change that.
Sure.
It seems to have settled down now, though. Like I'm not getting those kind of calls anymore.
Yeah. No, and I even got props to Amber Maggard in your office, that she called me out on one that she had a client looking at, and I was like, oh, I don't think you can short term there. And she had done her homework and said, no, you can.
Oh, nice.
And so it's just like you're saying, like it's just, you got to do your homework. You got to dig into it. And so on the seasonality and being in short term, I'm curious then, so because we all know Flagstaff is gorgeous in the summertime, and we're a lot cooler than the Valley. But at the same time, obviously a lot of winter traffic with snowball and the uniqueness of having snow. Which season does better?
Our best seasons at our Airbnb are March through September.
Okay, so summertime is better.
Yeah.
Or spring, or basically, spring to fall. Okay.
And because of our proximity to NAU, we get a lot of like NAU parents coming to see their kids, which I thought was cool, because I'm always going down to Tempe to see my daughter at ASU. Okay. I like when people tell me that.
Yeah, no, I love it. So you're able to help on that. That's a good cause.
But in Sedona, the off months are June, July, and the beginning of August, just because it's hot.
It's so hot. Okay. Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
But everything else is blazing.
Yeah. So it's just a longer season overall there. Gotcha.
And more international travelers go to Sedona, I would say, than Flag.
I'd be curious to see the statistics on that in like I would assume, well, maybe I should be careful with this. Again, just in the mind of myself here, that domestic are more likely to book Airbnbs and international more likely to use hotels. Do you think that's it? I don't know. Are we just totally guessing here, or is it not necessarily true?
I don't know.
I guess I said just because I haven't booked. I don't think I've booked an Airbnb international. I've traveled internationally. Oh, yeah, I have. I did book an Airbnb in Canada once. That was the first
Mexico,
Airbnb.
But
Yeah, I was gonna say that was the first Airbnb. So this is a fun story. It was the first Airbnb I'd ever booked, and it was this was like 12 years ago. I didn't have any kids yet, and so kind of a newer-ish thing as well. And it was up in Whistler, and so we were going on a ski trip with a buddy. We'd never been there, and you fly into Vancouver. You take a 2-hour it's almost like flying in Phoenix and you drive like 2.5 hours into the mountains. And we showed up at like 8 p.m. It's like stacked with snow and like late, like just like this little Whistler village was just like a frozen little icicle. And we're showing up like trying to figure out our address, take this bus and like hope the door code works. And it worked. It worked. It was kind of, but there was this, like, I don't know. So it's this interesting human trust thing where you hope the listing's real and that we're going to be able to enter someplace in the evening. But I've never had an issue. I don't know. Have you had any crazy guest stories or any instances?
Nothing yet, but I stayed in a technically Airbnb probably the year I got engaged. Gosh, like 24 years ago or something in California. It was like up in the mountains and we just stayed at this little cabin and, we had to go dig the key out from underneath the bush in the front yard. And there was like just a key hidden in the yard.
Like a treasure map.
And we actually mailed them a check and they mailed us a receipt. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you've been rolling in that business for much longer than I have. That's hilarious. The human trust that we operate on there. Yeah. And I know like now, especially when it's the website, it's big business. And I'm sure I would bet that the county stuff is still saying, hey, there has to be background checks and different things done. And so it's definitely
quiet hours is a big one. And
much more regulated now. But yeah, it was the Wild West back in the day, mailing a check and just out of good faith. So you mailed a check after your stay or before? Before. Okay. Well, so you really hoped that the cabin existed.
Yes.
Oh, too funny. That's wild. Well, and jump it. So, and back into the market as we're seeing things heat up. Do you have any top tips for buyers or sellers that need to kind of understand the dynamic of it? Things are shifting so quickly. Something that you took for truth and gospel, like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago is not true now, right? Interest rates have shifted.
Right.
Market is shifting, right? And that's why I just think it's difficult for people to keep pace with it, but it's very highly critical for them to secure the best home for them and their family. But what do you think? Top tips. Let's say top tips for sellers. What do you think are your top tips for sellers right now?
Call me. No.
Get it listed. They're moving.
They are moving. And right now there's a little less competition. And I do feel like, by May.
Listing competition. Yeah, there's a little less out there.
There's a lot less listing competition, but there's a ton of buyer demand. So it really, it's always a good time to list, but it really is right now. Yeah. And buyers are figuring out, ways around how they're going to be able to buy at a higher interest rate and make it happen. And then just, shift something else later. If the interest rates go down or if they don't go down, they have a plan to mitigate their, monthly nut so that they can get around that. And so they're out there. There's a lot of buyers. There's so many buyers.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. And I've been trying to help my buyers through that same, I'm like, don't listen to the news. Just don't listen to the news.
Yeah.
You just got to listen to your gut. If you love the house, we're going to get aggressive on it and we're going to figure out how to get it for you. If you don't love it, who cares? Don't worry about it. But how are you going to use it later? Like, you can't just always buy a house just because you want to live in it. Like, sometimes you have to make it a stepping stone or make it a business decision. Like, sometimes you buy something now that you can use that to rent later and buy something else and use the income from your rental, or you buy something that you put sweat equity into and then you get your equity back and then you buy something else. And so the market isn't always going to be like this. So if you need to buy something, just buy it. And then we will, work around that and make that actually, help you grow wealth. You don't have to struggle, just get something, get started, because I don't think that the market's going to go down, you need to get your foot in now, because you'll be like me and everyone else going, man, I wish I would have bought last year or the year before. I wish I would have bought in 2006 or 2007, 2008. It's sad.
Yeah. And as you talk through that I think, yes, the plan is critical. And it's a very unique thing where people have to combine like housing and their need for housing, because we all like this thing called indoor housing.
Well,
Or indoor living.
Plumbing
right?
is nice.
Yeah, exactly. In the kitchen, and it's not perma camping is nice. Caveman life, not so good anymore. And so it's like you're marrying this basically life, pretty much necessity here in the United States of America and mostly over the world, to your financial plan. And so it's all a matter of, just like what anyone would tell you on like a 401k, is like the sooner you get your foot in the door. You've seen those projections of like, hey, this, Sally contributed overall less, but started 20 years earlier. Right. And so like, you don't need to buy the big dream house now, but get your foot in the door. And I do think it's very important for, like, I would not, I can't overstate this enough, is that a lot of folks just do not understand markets in general. And they like to think of the market, right? And there's not a market. Everything's different, right?
There's lots of micro markets.
There's so many different markets.
Yeah.
There's different housing markets here that are going to be, like, when we looked at, and I just did this with my brother on the podcast last week, is we looked at percentage change from 1991 to now in real estate values. In Arizona, it's like 462% increase.
Oh, wow.
In most of the country, it's like 200-ish, right? So that's where, hey, those markets did well. This market did double that.
Right.
Right. And so it's, and then you have stock markets, bond markets, you have international markets, you have gold and gas and silver. And so you have all these different things. And where I'm going with this is that as we head into, so we got to remember, the news is very selective with what they talk about, but we have to remember, like, here we're heading into this like pandemic. We all remember, it's like those total critical life moments. Like, I remember sitting at my in-laws watching the one of that big major, when they announced all the PPE and like all the stimulus and everything.
Right.
And we're sitting here just thinking, like, what are we, like, not knowing. There was a moment of just pure, like, we don't know what the future holds for us as a civilization, for humanity. It was like just weird times. And we were very, very concerned economically, and restaurants are shutting down. And it's just like, it was just such a weird time. But guess what? Real estate rocketed.
Oh, big time.
Rocketed because interest rates came to 70-year historic lows, right? And so real estate's been moving on. It's definitely, when we come from breakneck speeds to normal, and now it's like not quite normal with these higher interest rates, where I guess trying to finally get to this moment was, so many people are going to be thinking, hey, the stock market may not be doing well, the Fed's doing this, people are doing that. But those are other markets. We have to be able to say, what is the housing market doing? And the housing market, even though I think just in the 70s and 90s, when we went through high inflationary times, like, we saw a 30% loss in the S&P in the 70s and 50% loss in the 90s after inflation kind of was curbed. So it's highly likely that we're going to see some negative impacts here in the economy from everything that's gone down.
Yeah.
But housing, that will mean lower interest rates. And we'll have to see. Most experts aren't predicting that will happen to housing. So that's where I guess I'm going to.
Well, the shortage is going to keep that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't understand too. So speak to that a little bit of shortage and inventory. Do you have any like stats or numbers you can give to us on, like, this is how bad the inventory is right now?
Oh boy, I don't have any memorized in my head, but we are far below the number of homes that we need in Arizona, and mostly across the United States. But Arizona is drastically low on inventory.
Like, cause how many, do you have any idea or clue, like, just in that area of, like, because you just said it anecdotally in this over the weekend, 2 homes listed in Ponderosa Trails. How many homes are total in Ponderosa Trails? Do you have any number on that?
I think it's like 1,500 maybe.
Okay, so
Somewhere
1,500
around
homes
there.
and 2, right? And I think I heard when we were talking earlier with your office that someone had cited, or in our masterminds, that someone had cited like 150 homes, like, on market or something of that nature. And that was a week or so ago, so I'm not sure the number now. But when you take a population of like 76,000 and say that there are 120 homes for sale, that just doesn't seem like good math.
Right. And plus, and right now we don't have the second homers coming in, but as soon as it gets hot in the valley, they'll be coming too. So it'll be even more of a shortage.
Yeah. So
I know it's not good news.
yeah. Well, and I think that's hopefully, if anything, to the people that are wanting to take life by the horns, just knowing like you have to make a plan, and it can happen. You gotta be ready. You gotta make a plan. You gotta be ready to not just be pre-qualified, but we've talked about you need to be talking with your realtor beforehand. Talk with Tammara beforehand on here's all the tools in the toolbox to when we find the right house to get it.
Yes. Well, and Flagstaff, I moved here almost 25 years ago. And I remember just having sticker shock. I came here from Florida where the houses are very cheap. And I was like, oh my God, we're never going to get a house. Like, that is so much. I was shocked. But don't you know, the day I closed on my first house, that I scrambled like mad to get stated income loan, 8%. We took $5,000 that my in-laws gave me for our wedding, and we took a student loan out for Brian, and then he dropped his classes.
Oh no!
Like literally, like we just scrambled to get this house.
Yeah.
As soon as we closed, the next day I was like, yeah, let those things go up. Go, 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 go.
Yeah.
You just have to join the club. And then once you're a member, then you will root those prices on.
And I love that.
That's it.
You know, and I love that you share that there, where I think a lot of people see like, oh, it must have been easy for you, Tammara, or like when you bought at those prices. But getting your foot in the door here is, you know, and I've talked about before, like my very first loan here in Flagstaff was FHA, and just like scrounged on my 3.5%. And got a little bit of concession from the seller and like made it happen. And, you know, and so, you know, it's, and we were like, and I always remember, and I do this because we did it like in that first home purchase. This is in 2010. And then from then on, I've always laughed with every buyer that we came in and said, hey, this is our hard line limit. We are spending this. And then we go $35,000 over that. Right. And it's just like, I know, like, you know, and so, yeah, it happened then. It's still happening now. I understand that there's different dynamics there. But yeah, I hope that's encouraging for people to know, like, you're going to have to struggle. You're going to have to work. Only, you know, if it was easy, everyone would do it. Right. I guess that's kind of some good concluding thoughts. Any other concluding thoughts, Tammara?
That's all I can think of.
She's an expert serving Sedona and Flagstaff. Give her a call, guys.